Picture this. It's 1961. You walk into a Chrysler showroom expecting tomorrow's dream machine. And instead you're staring at something that looks like 3 different decades had a collision in a sheet metal factory. The salesman is sweating. The customer is confused. And somewhere in Detroit, a designer is updating his resume. This isn't just a story of ugly cars. This is the story of what happens when an empire built on chrome and confidence decides to gamble everything on a vision so radical. The American public literally turned around and walked away. Welcome to the strangest chapter in automotive history, where Chrysler tried to sell the future and accidentally delivered a cautionary tale. In the late 1950s, Chrysler was the automaker that made Americans believe the future wasn't just coming. It was already parked in their driveway. While competitors played it safe, caught between luxury and practicality, Chrysler stepped forward like a visionary with rocket fuel in their veins. Long bodies that stretched like highways. Low stances that hugged the pavement. Gleaming chrome that caught every ray of sunlight. Bold character lines that looked like they were carved by the wind itself. And details everywhere, aircraft-inspired, rocket-inspired, space-age madness that screamed one thing. We're not just building cars, we're building dreams. The heat. The heat concentrated toward the rear. Designers were pushing boundaries that nobody asked them to push. One proposal suggested moving the license plate mounting area completely to the left side of the car instead of keeping it centered. It's such a small detail, right? But think about what that means. The rear of a car is sacred ground. It's where balance lives, where symmetry speaks, where everything is supposed to be proper, controlled, centered like a signature of authority. And here was Chrysler saying, forget all that. Let's break the rules. But stepping out of the design studio and straight onto the showroom floor, the dream started to crack. Because on the street, nothing is theoretical anymore. Nothing is just a bold experiment. Out here, people vote with their wallets. And they were about to reject everything Chrysler had gambled on. The first victim was the Valiant, Chrysler's economy car. This was supposed to be simple. A grocery getter. A budget-friendly compact for everyday driving. Something practical, unassuming, forgettable in the best way. Instead, what rolled off the production line looked like it couldn't decide what it wanted to be when it grew up. The body character lines fought each other. From one angle, you saw swooping curves trying to look modern and aerodynamic. From another angle, you saw crisp, straight lines try to look muscular and bold. It was as if each panel had been sketched by a different designer who never talked to each other. The wagon version made this split personality even more obvious. The body tried to be soft and flowing to appear contemporary, while simultaneously trying to be boxy and practical to haul cargo. The result? A car that looked uncertain, confused, like it was apologizing for existing. Park it next to a Ford Falcon, and the difference isn't about horsepower or trunk space. It's about philosophy. The Falcon is clean, straightforward, easy on the eyes. It knows exactly what it is and doesn't apologize. The Valiant makes you work to understand it. It demands that you learn to appreciate its weirdness. And here's the brutal truth about economy cars. They're never allowed to demand anything. They're supposed to blend in, do their job, and let you get on with your life. The Valiant failed that assignment spectacularly. The second model was the 1961 Plymouth, and it became the poster child for what designers call the plucked chicken phenomenon. Tail fins, those glorious symbols of the jet age, had defined the late 50s. They gave cars presence, drama, personality. And then, suddenly, they vanished. Just gone. Ripped away without anything to replace them. The body and rear of the 61 Plymouth fell hollow, like someone had surgically removed the very thing that gave the car its stance and forgot to fill in the gap. What remained was a shape that looked incomplete, unfinished, naked. But while the rear retreated into emptiness, the front end went in the exact opposite direction, as if desperately trying to compensate. The grille gave you the impression of a dog mid-growl. That aggressive, almost sinister grin that makes you both curious and vaguely uncomfortable. Here's an interesting detail people love to point out. That grille shape, with its hourglass contours, feels weirdly similar to the design language that would only become trendy on luxury cars decades later. The Plymouth was accidentally ahead of its time in the worst way possible because nobody in 1961 was ready for it. And then your eyes drift to the back again. The hollow feeling returns. The tail lights are shoved out to the extreme sides, as if the designer cleared out the center stage and then ran out of time before building something new to put there. It's unfinished. It's awkward. It's a car caught between two eras and comfortable in neither. The third model, the 1962 Dodge, revealed something even more human: hesitation. The dual headlight arrangement on this car couldn't make up its mind whether it wanted to sit inside the grille or outside of it. So it ended up hanging somewhere in between, like a person standing awkwardly in a doorway, unable to commit to entering or leaving. When a car looks straight at you, its face needs clarity. The headlights should have purpose, alignment, intent. They should speak the same visual language. On the 62 Dodge, the height was off. The placement was off. The whole composition made the car look like it was scowling at the world, angry and irritable, ready to pick a fight with anyone who dared make eye contact. This design gets criticized relentlessly because it falls into that unfortunate category. An angry face created not by bold intention, but by design awkwardness. It's the automotive equivalent of resting scowl face, and nobody asked for it. The fourth model, the 1961 Chrysler, had the exact opposite problem of the Plymouth. While the Plymouth suffered from having its defining features stripped away too suddenly, the 1961 Chrysler suffered from holding on too long. It kept those massive tail fins at a time when the rest of the automotive world had already moved on to cleaner, more streamlined shapes. The result was a car that looked painfully outdated the moment it hit the showroom. It didn't belong in 1961. It belonged back in 1957, when fins were still kings. This is the kind of mistake that destroys credibility faster than anything else. It's not that the car was ugly in a vacuum. It's that it made people feel like Chrysler was living in slow motion compared to everyone else. It made the brand look out of touch, disconnected behind the times. And then we arrive at the fifth and final model, often considered the worst offender on this entire list, the 1961 Imperial. If you had to describe it in one phrase, it would be this: a train wreck of multiple decades crashing into each other on the same body panel. It carried elements of the 1950s with its tail fins and jet-inspired taillights, symbols of the space-age optimism that defined that era. It tried to adopt traits of the 1960s with a square, stern C-pillar that carried that newer, boxier aesthetic. But here's the irony. That hard-edged C-pillar didn't match the rounded roof dome, creating a jarring tonal mismatch right along the car's horizon line. Modern geometry clashing with vintage curves. And as if that identity crisis wasn't enough, the 1961 Imperial also featured something that made it simultaneously luxurious and bizarre: freestanding, classic-style headlights that evoked the 1930s. Retro nostalgia layered on top of retro futurism, layered on top of contemporary minimalism. It was too much. It was a car that couldn't pick a decade, so it tried to be all of them at once. The consequences arrived swiftly and mercilessly. Customers turned away. Showrooms that had once been packed with curious buyers now echoed with empty silence. Sales didn't just dip, they collapsed. And with them, confidence in the entire design direction began to crack. Chrysler had gambled big and lost bigger. They needed an answer, and it couldn't be a band-aid solution. It needed to be a fundamental, root-level transformation. In 1961, Virgil Exner, the man behind this radical vision, was removed from his position of design authority. This wasn't just the firing of a designer. It was an admission, an acknowledgement that the Jet Future era had passed its expiration date. The man who replaced Exner was Elwood Engel, and that choice was far from random. Engel's name was tied to the car that had become the new benchmark of American automotive taste, the 1961 Lincoln Continental. If Exner had been the designer of curves, drama, motion, and emotion, then Engel was the designer of order, discipline, straight lines, and calm restraint. This shift in leadership birthed what became known as the Lincolnization strategy. The goal was simple in concept, but massive in execution: bring Chrysler design closer to the spirit of the 1961 Lincoln. More box-like forms, flatter surfaces, cleaner, straighter lines, fewer unnecessary flourishes, proportions controlled with surgical precision to create a sense of luxury through discipline rather than decoration. Instead of trying to make cars look like flying objects breaking the sound barrier, Chrysler began making cars look like solid, imposing architectural forms, buildings on wheels, monuments to restraint. Instead of using tail fins and jet-inspired theatrics to command attention, they shifted to clean body panels, sharp but controlled character lines, and a calm, composed stance that projected quiet authority. The results spoke for themselves. By 1965, just a few years after the disaster, you could see the transformation clearly. Chrysler cars looked clean, formal, far less controversial, and most importantly, they looked like they belonged to their time. Many observers remarked that Chrysler vehicles by that point carried a distinctly Lincoln-like presence, not just because of shared design language, straight lines, and blocky proportions, but because of the same underlying character. Luxury communicated through restraint instead of excess. When this story ends with Chrysler returning to normal, finding solid ground again, I always get this strange feeling. It's like stepping out of an old movie theater where the film wasn't perfect. Some scenes even made you wince. But you still can't forget a single frame. Because those strange Chrysler cars of the early 1960s aren't just cars. They're artifacts of a moment when Detroit dared to gamble, dared to experiment, dared to make things unlike anything anyone else was building, even if the price was being mocked, rejected, and ultimately forced to retreat. They're proof that sometimes the boldest visions crash hardest, that being ahead of your time can be just as fatal as being behind it, that the market doesn't always reward bravery, and beauty isn't always enough if nobody understands what they're looking at. So now I want to ask you something. It's the kind of question classic car people argue about until the sun comes up. Would you rather drive a car that's boring but beautiful? The kind of properly gorgeous machine that gets universal praise, the one everyone nods at approvingly, the one that fits perfectly into its era without making a single person uncomfortable? Or would you rather drive a car that's ugly but impossible to ignore? The kind where the moment you park it on the street, people stop mid-conversation. They stare. They squint. They take a second look just to make sure their eyes aren't playing tricks on them. The kind of car that makes people feel something, even if that something is confusion, disgust, or reluctant fascination. Because here's the truth. One of those cars will fade into history quietly, respected but forgotten. And the other will live forever, flawed and famous, in the memories of everyone who ever saw it. If you enjoyed this journey through one of Detroit's strangest chapters, hit that like button and subscribe. Because next time, we're diving into another tale of automotive ambition, failure, and the thin line between genius and madness.